Good morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call to order the Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation. Madam Secretary, could you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblywoman Dickman. Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen. Senator Goycochea.
Here.
Senator Nguyen. Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
And Chair Harris.
Here, please mark members present as they arrive. We'll go ahead and just jump right on into our first budget of the day, and that will be the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission. Welcome.
Thank you.
And you all can go ahead and begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Mike Sherlock for the record. I am the Executive Director of the Commission on Peace Officers Standards and Training, better known as POST. With me is Chris Carter, who is our Deputy Director, and also Daniel Marlowe is here from Admin Services. We have decided not to use any handouts or PowerPoints. Our budget is small. It's not complicated in any way, and we really don't want to introduce any sort of distractions at this point. So let me just quickly explain a little bit about POST and our mission. First, the NRS defines who and what agencies employ those with peace officer powers and directs that POST has jurisdiction over those agencies and peace officer staff. This includes sheriffs and deputies, police officers, state police, state and local investigators, parole and probation, juvenile probation, alternative sentencing, bailiffs, constable peace officers, court marshals, custody staff, which includes prison guards, tribal agencies where we have an interlocal agreement, and most recently, law enforcement dispatchers on a voluntary basis. By statute, POST is tasked with regulating peace officers, peace officer training, and providing and presenting both basic training, which is commonly known as an academy, and advanced training for professional development. We do this by developing, implementing, and ensuring compliance with minimum standards related to the recruitment, hiring, certifying, maintaining certification, the training of, and establishing the minimum standards for every peace officer in the state of Nevada. No one under the statutes may exercise peace officer powers unless certified by POST. I want to stress that POST is tasked with the setting of minimum standards for those subjects under our jurisdiction. We encourage policing agencies to increase those standards as it relates to their organizational and community needs. Our commission is comprised of experts in each category of policing and community members. Their goal is to create training requirements and standards through the regulatory process. They are the experts, and that's who we look to for NAC changes. At POST, we deliver both a basic police academy and advanced training to include supervisor, management, executive training, instructor development, leadership, and where we have funding, things like assignment-based training. We ensure compliance through audits and inspections. And as I'm sure you are aware, there's been a lot of attention paid to training and peace officer standards nationally in recent years, both from a political standpoint and by the media. Nevada, of course, has not been immune to this attention. To carry out our mandates, we are divided into two divisions. The Standards Division assists with the scheduling and planning of commission meetings, making recommendations on NAC changes, updates, and proposes new NAC development, works with LCB in codifying any new or changed NACs, ensures compliance with adopted NAC through audits and inspections, validates certificate requests and issues certificates, reviews training for certification, compiles information and evidence for certification revocation hearings, makes presentations to the Commission on suspensions, revocations, and waiver requests, ensures notices are delivered regarding the suspension and revocation of peace officer certificates. This division also approves training from both private vendors and law enforcement agencies, and ensures training meets minimum established standards to include both basic training programs and advanced training programs. Our training division is tasked with providing both basic training and advanced training. On the basic training side, we present two 17-week academies per year. Our academy can accommodate 34 cadets. We have seen an increased demand for the academy and foresee this demand to continue and to increase for at least the short term. Based on industry standards, federal recommendations, and field training officer feedback, we have increased our decision-based and scenario-based curriculum and continue to strive to graduate cadets who can make lawful, moral, and ethical decisions while under stress. On the advanced training side, we provide courses in basic instructor development, background investigations, first-line supervision, leadership, management, and executive training. In addition, we host training such as range instructor, taser instructor, arrest control techniques, and have developed over 50 online courses. Regarding our budget, I would like to remind everyone that our current budget is nearly 100% fee-based, a vast majority of that being court assessment fees. We currently get no general fund monies at all. Just to give you a perspective, 12 years ago, Post regulated and managed about 6,000 peace officers with their associated records. Today, we are approaching 18,000 active and inactive records. Our workload has increased threefold, and yet our staff has not increased. And we do a good job managing these huge increases just thanks to the dedication of staff. We manage the workload with 16 full-time positions, which is fewer than we had 15 years ago. We have watched as court assessment monies have shrunk. We believe that's going to continue. A recent audit by GFO predicts a 70% decrease in court assessments, or court assessment funding for Post, and that audit recommends a more reliable, stable, and effective funding mechanism for Post. We are hoping this budget recommendation will fulfill that recommendation. This budget makes strides in increasing and improving our ability to carry out those mandates and to improve our operations. With that, I will pass it over to Deputy Director Carter to explain our enhancement units and their funding. Chris?
Good morning. For the record, Chris Carter, Deputy Director, Nevada Peace Officer Standards and Training. In preparing our enhancement requests for the next biennium, I'll be talking about a couple of requests, and we'll be going through these in the order of importance or priority for us. Our first request has to do with a secure learning management and testing system. As most of you probably know, over the last couple of years, the state has been working on implementing Success Factor Smart 21. Through that process and working with the project management group, we've determined that the Smart 21 platform does not fit the needs of Nevada Post. There are many areas in where that platform is great for ongoing staff and state employee training, but it does not provide us with secure testing, and our current online course content or that content that we would deliver electronically would need to be significantly modified to be migrated into the new platform. We don't have that expertise. Basically what we're told is we would have to rewrite every one of those courses to be transferred or migrated over into the new platform. Our biggest concern, however, is the inability for us to have a secure state certification exam. Under the Smart 21 system, our state certification exam would be vulnerable. We would not have exclusive control over it. It would require us to take additional steps to schedule testing, which would include that we would have to provide every agency that wants to give the state certification exam with a password that would give them full-time access to the test. Typically, we also find that if you have administrative privileges in the system, you could go into our content, make changes. You could look at our exam even if you weren't a part of the Peace Officer Standards and Training. So we think that that's the most dire need for us in the learning management system is a secure testing platform. Our next request is we're requesting an increase in our operating expenses. As Director Sherlock pointed out, we're averaging 30 to 34 cadets each session. As those cadets are residential, our academy is residential, they have a dormitory. Most of the rural agencies, the state send their cadets to us. A section of our line item involves a meal allowance for our cadets. That meal allowance is based on 26 cadets. So historically, over the last several bienniums, we've found that that line item in the budget is underfunded, so we're asking for an increase to offset that underfunding. Next is that we're asking for funding for staff training for post staff. As the director said, we have 16 full-time employees, 4 of which are assigned full-time to either the academy or the delivery of training. Unfortunately, we do not have a funding mechanism to train our own people in the most current techniques or things that have changed. So we're asking for funding in order to be able to take our staff and to train them to current standards or provide training to them about any changes in certain techniques so that when they deliver this training, they're delivering the most current version of any training that we do. Next, we've asked for an increase in our commission expenses. In 2021, the legislature added 2 members to our commission, taking us from 9 members to 11. Per statute, the members of the commission are not paid. However, they are entitled to travel reimbursement, per diem lodging costs when they attend meetings. While the legislature added the 2 members to the commission, there was no offset funding to now cover those additional expenses. So we're asking for a small increase in that area. And we're also asking to update our recording equipment in order to record our commission meetings. Current equipment's very old and unreliable, and during the pandemic and trying to hold meetings remotely, we found the weaknesses in our system, so we want to address that. Our post facility, including our Academy Armory, is a control facility. You must have key card access to get in and out of the building. Our current key card system is over 15 years old. And when the batteries in this, we actually cannot find replacement parts for when this system needs to be repaired or things go down. Our system's also wireless, meaning that it's subject to intrusion. So someone could actually hack into the system. So we're asking for an increase in funding or a one-time enhancement for us to update our security and our access control throughout our facility, specifically our armory. Currently, our armory does not have any cameras monitoring coming and going. Our parking lot, our facility is pretty much vacant over the weekends. We don't have the ability to remotely access or view what may be going on. We've had thefts of parts of vehicles, thefts of gasoline from our training vehicles, so we'd like to increase our security. More importantly than anything in that aspect is our Academy Armory, where weapons and ammunition are stored. We'd like to upgrade that system. Post has not had new office furniture, again, in over 15 years. We've been gathering our office furniture from state surplus. Much of it is fallen apart. So we've asked for a one-time enhancement to purchase some new office furniture. And that concludes basically the enhancements that we're asking for in this year's, or this biennium's budget. Thank you.
And with that, we can answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. I think we have the first question from Senator Nguyen.
Hi, thank you, and I apologize to the committee and our presenters that I was running a little late this morning. I was looking at this, and I know that there's a lot of unknowns, and while I appreciate the fact that we are funding not only restitution to victims first, as well as not funding our your agency based on court fees and court and administrative fees. How would replacing those court administrative assessments with general fund appropriations impact your operations?
Thank you for the question. Mike Sherlock for the record, and I might go to Daniel for this, but from our perspective, you know, it's difficult for us, and we're really going through it this year, in that you look at cash flow and cash on hand. And so for us, although we go through the normal process as we're doing now as if we're general fund, the reality is we are not funded on July 1. We are funded as court assessments come in. And so it makes it very difficult we've had occasions where we cannot pay bills because we don't have the cash on hand. If we were funded via general fund as of July 1st, and then those monies are replaced, at least we'd be able to continue our operations and not act like it's a household checkbook where we don't have enough money in the bank to do what we have to do. And as you know, when you have vendors providing services and we can't their payments being held back because we don't have cash because the court assessments aren't there. It's a difficult situation for us. So from our perspective, getting that funding up front would be huge for our operation, no doubt about it.
Okay, follow up, Chair. No, I'm glad to hear that. I was wondering if you have suffered, since this is the way it's always been, where you're relying on these incoming fees, and whether or not this kind of certainty would make it easier for you to accomplish your other tasks that you're statutorily required to do.
Yeah, Mike Sherlock for the record. Thank you for that question also. It's been an ongoing problem, no doubt about it, but nothing like we've seen recently. In the past, we may not make full authorization in court assessments, but we were able to fund a fairly large reserve. But we've been, that's been swept now. And so we're just in a dire situation, to be honest with you, with the court assessments not coming in.
Sorry, one more follow-up. I just want to make it clear that I appreciate that, having that consistency to be able to pay your bills and to be able to fund your agency, I think is appropriate. Did you see, like, with the incorporation of Marcy's Law in 2018, and then also with COVID, I imagine there was a downtick in that. Obviously, the 116, I know that was references, but that hasn't even, that just went into effect like in January 1. So was there a significant decrease during COVID and with the Marcy's Law changes?
Again, thank you for the question, Mike Sherlock for the record. Marcy Law for us, I can't really speak to directly with post. I know there were some issues in different areas of public safety, but not so much for us. But I would say for sure, COVID, it probably had a huge impact on. Let's be honest. If tickets are not being written, fines are not being collected, and we're not seeing the funding, and we know that there was a substantial reduction in self-initiated activity by police officers during COVID, which affects those receipts, no doubt about it.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to follow up on E300 around the updated learning system. So I think I understand where you're coming from in terms of the issues with the proposed Smart 21 system. I know that currently you guys are using the Nevada eLearn platform along with several other agencies. And I know both of these questions may be a little bit tricky because they're some bigger picture questions. Do you know what the current timeline is for the phase out of the eLearn system?
Thank you, sir. Chris Carter for the record, Deputy Director. We actually do not. What our communication has been during the Smart 21 transition process was that they were going to decommission NV eLearn in December of this year. My understanding is that based on issues that have arisen with the Smart 21 platform, I don't know that there is a hard date set for decommissioning the current NV eLearn system. I would note that certainly NV eLearn has worked well for us up to this point, and if worse came to worse, we would continue to utilize the NV eLearn platform. But I would also note that our research has determined that that platform originally was open source, basically Moodle software, and the state's been using it for a long time. We're at the point to where our expertise with the current NV eLearn system means that when agencies throughout the state call the help desk, oftentimes the help desk refers them to us. So we don't have necessarily the expert or the tech expertise. Should the system go down or we have a major corruption, we would be in big trouble because while we know how to utilize a system and make it work, I don't know that necessarily even state IT that the system is supported enough that if it did go down, that state IT could get it up and running in a timeline that would be sufficient for us. what we had in mind was that in asking for this proposal for the new LMS system would be that if we're able to eventually transition to the Smart 21 to make it work for us, then we certainly would do that. But we saw the current request for the LMS system as a short-term fix. If eventually we needed to stay with that platform, we could. But if we can get Smart 21 up and running, any contract that we sign with a new system would be short-term, in hopes that eventually we could save that expense.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that, and I've seen the eLearn system, and it's working for now, but I can definitely see the benefits for an upgrade. The only other question I had is, and again, I know this is a little bit bigger picture, but have you had any conversations with other agencies? Do you know of any other agencies that may be running into similar issues with the kind of limitations of the Smart 21 proposal? And where I'm getting at with this is this a bigger issue that we either need to try and fix with Smart 21 so that it can address the issues that you and maybe other agencies have, or is there potentially a need for other agencies to also explore a similar alternative?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. Chris Carter for the record. Yes, we've had extensive talks with the Nevada Department of Public Safety, who also uses NV eLearn to provide ongoing training for their personnel. Obviously, every law enforcement academy in the state utilizes the state certification exam through the NV eLearn. What we were hoping is that if we were able to secure the proposed new learning management system, that DPS would be able to piggyback onto the system with us, that we could make the system work for both of us. But DPS is in the same basic position that we are, that Smart 21 is not working for them based on its current configurations and the inability for them to have exclusive control over their content. So we've been working very closely with them right up to this point. I don't know if they're asking for an enhancement, but I know that we have discussed the potential of if either of us were to get funded for the new learning management system, then we would explore how we could cooperate, piggyback with each other, and make it work for both agencies.
Okay, I think we'll move on to Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. You had mentioned that with the academies that you can take up to 34 cadets. My question is that class size adequate for the need of officers? And if not, how would we go about increasing that class size?
Thank you for the question. Mike Sherlock for the record. A couple things there. First, our facility limits how many bodies we can get into the classroom, for one. But a lot of other considerations have to be brought in. Recruiting is extremely difficult right now. Although there's a definite need for peace officers in the state of Nevada. Filling even at 34 people is tough right now. Although we have seen it increase, but it's a tough thing. Keep in mind that I think we have. I'm trying to think. We have about 17 basic academies across the state, so we're not the only ones, obviously. And we deal with mostly rural, and the smaller state agencies come to us. And so at this point, I think we're okay at 34, just because it's hard to recruit. And we have some flexibility to allow certain agencies to put more bodies in where we have empty seats, and we try to keep it full for the ones that are able to recruit, to keep our academies full. But yeah.
Follow-up, Chair? Thank you. What kind of activities do you do to outreach and recruit people to come to the academy?
So thank you for that, Mike Sherlock for the record. We're the regulatory agency, so those coming through the academy must be employed, and they're employed by law enforcement agencies, not by us. And so where we can help, we do help with recruiting if there's anything we can do, but it's the individual agencies that are recruiting that send their people to us, so we don't get too much into those individual agency recruiting programs.
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. You talked a little bit about the number of records increasing, the number of your staff has not increased, and then minimum standards being what you are attempting to accomplish relative to the training for our peace officers. I'm curious to know, is there a list of pending trainings that you'd like to grow into as an organization? You talked a little bit about the political nature of where we are, how peace officers are viewed in our communities, right? Our expectations for peace officers bringing peace. Are there additional trainings that you would like to grow into that we don't have on a list?
Yes, thank you for that, Mike Sherlock, for the record. So, as you can imagine, the way our budget is structured, historically, we have relied heavily on federal grants. And so much of our training is developed through that process. We're able to secure grant funding. We have several going right now. We're AB 478 training, which the legislature passed. We have a grant to create train the trainer and curriculum for that particular set of training. So a lot of it's done through federal grant. I wish there was a better way to do that. We have another grant right now that we were able to secure where we are reimbursing agencies for backfill. New to Nevada, it's something that I wanted to do for a long time. Other states do this, but where we're able to reimburse policing agencies who send their people to training, for backfill and for them to be able to send their people to training. So we do a lot of that type of stuff. We just created a leadership institute that we are kicking off in July that we're pretty excited about. But, we have a shoestring budget, so a lot of it's just, relying on experts in the area that want to volunteer and that type of thing. But we get it done.
All right, members, any additional questions? Senator Goycochea.
Thank you, and I'll be very brief. But again, the real problem with all of it, and I'm hearing in classes you have 6 or 7 people in the class. You really can't fill the classes today, can you?
Thank you for the question, Mike Sherlock, for the record. Our academy classes are pretty close to full each time. There's a lot of jockeying around to get that done. By rule, we allow 2 cadets per agency, but where we see agencies are unable to hire 2 people, we'll let a different agency put 4 people in. So those that recruit better get more spots in the academy right now. But don't get me wrong, recruiting is the issue in this country right now. There is no doubt about it. But we've been lucky enough to keep our academies close to full.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, not seeing any additional questions from members. You are free to go. Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and close the budget hearing on budget account 1013774 and open up the budget hearing on budget account 1013740. That's the Division of Parole and Probation. Welcome. And we will have you all for 2 budgets. If you don't mind, we'll just do one at a time if that's okay, and then go to questions, and we'll move on to the next one. So go ahead and begin whenever you are ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair. This is George Tagliati, Director of the Department of Public Safety. We had intended to be present and have the North Chief for the Parole and Probation up in Carson City, the Southern Command, along with the Northern Command. But it seems that the weather and Southwest Airlines have not cooperated. So the folks that are going to really have the lion's share of the testimony this morning are Major James Schubert, who is in Las Vegas on my left, and Major Aaron Evans, who is the Chief of the Northern Command, who is, I can see, with Deputy Director Sherry Brigham and I believe, I can't see who else is at the table, but with that, I want to say good morning to you and good morning to the committee, and we're prepared to make our presentation, and I'll turn it over to Deputy Director Sherry Brigham.
This is Sherry Brigham for the record. Our other people at the table is Kim, our PIO, and Andy McCool, our new ASO3 for parole and probation. And I'm going to let Aaron begin with the program and interrupt us or let us know if we're moving too slow or too fast. Thank you. Oh, I apologize. Major James Schubert will be starting down in Las Vegas. Thank you.
Good morning. We cut our presentation down, sorry, Major James Schubert for the record. Cut our presentation down to the meat and potatoes, and then obviously we'll be ready for your questions afterwards. The first slide is our program descriptions, and I can't see it, so hopefully you guys are on the same page as I am. But this just really talks about parole and probation and what we do and what we offer to the law enforcement community. We're very diverse. Not only do we do supervision of offenders, but we do over 6,000 to 9,000 pre-sentence investigations a year. We do pardons, post-conviction reports, and then also we collect restitution and disburse money to the victims of crimes. So we do a lot in the law enforcement community. Next slide. Jumping right into our budget maintenance units. M201 is based off the 2024-2025 JFA projections. In the budget, it reads losing 3 supervisor positions. We believe that's a typo. It should be reading specialist 4 positions. And we're going to talk about this later in E226, where we kind of change the methodology of how we determine the staffing ratios for the force, which would actually gain us 6 new positions. But we'll talk about that later on in our enhancements. You look at M202, again, based on 2024-2025 JFA projections, we are slated to gain 9 DPS officers and 4 DPS sergeants. And then in addition to that, we would lose 2 vacant specialist 3 positions in our LRS pod supervision unit, these positions are already vacant. And then M204 is gaining 1 civilian in headquarters, our warrants and extraditions unit. So we'd gain 1 position there. And at the bottom, you can read there, these are based on the fall numbers. We have a typo in there as well. Spring should read fall 2022 JFA projections. And then we will get new projections coming up here in the mid-session, which may or may not adjust these a little bit. And then talking about M201 and E226. So E226 changes our methodology. Right now, it's based on how many reports our 4s write, and we change that methodology to how many specialist 3s they supervise, and we'll talk about that later. Next slide. These are our enhancements. So E673 is a salary adjustment for upgrading DPS officers, 1 and 2s, and sergeants by 2 grades. You're going to see this is a DPS-wide enhancement, and you'll see that in other DPS budgets as well. And then here's E226, which is to request a funding of 6 new P&P Specialist 4 positions for our court services. And again, this is due to a staffing study that was approved in the 2019 session. And we have an upcoming slide on that. And then also E350 is reestablishing our state-funded house arrest program, and we have a slide for that as well upcoming. Next slide. So here's our E226. Again, there's a Specialist 4 time study was approved in the 2019 session, and we completed that in June of 2022. And the study offered us multiple solutions for how we handle the Specialist 4 positions. The division selected the model that would staff 1 Specialist 4 to 4 Specialist 3s. And the reason we chose that one was that will allow the Specialist 4 to do the reading and the proofreading of those reports, and that takes it away from the supervisors right now who really just can't keep up with that amount of work that we have. And we also, we updated our class specs for these positions in July of 2022. And what we did is we removed that reading component, the writing component for the 4s, and that's why you see a reduction in M201, because we stopped assigning them cases. So it looks like we do not need those, when in actuality we changed their class specification, we changed their major duties. Keeping the 3 specialist 4s from M201, we would need an additional 6 specialist 4s to achieve that 4-to-1 ratio statewide. And this is going to be a multifaceted approach. Like I said, we're being fiscally responsible and asking for these 6 positions, and then we'll reevaluate, over the next 2 years, and then we'll make our adjustments then. We had a few questions about why didn't we ask for more positions, and asking for the 6 additional will get us to that 4-to-1 ratio. So that's what we went with. And next slide. And then E350 is bringing back the state-funded house arrest program. This was established in FY 18, and then at that time we had to create all the policies and procedures. We spent approximately $240,000 that fiscal year. FY 19 was probably our best year to gauge how much money we would need for state-funded house arrest, and in that year we spent over $459,000 on state-funded house arrest. And with AB 236, that added a requirement for the division to utilize and exhaust all graduated sanctions, which we have state-funded house arrest in every level of a sanction for our offenders. So we do see an increase in that, and the amount we asked for should cover all participants in that program. And I will pass it on to Deputy Chief Aaron Evans.
Good morning. Thank you. Aaron Evans, Deputy Chief, Northern Command, Parole and Probation. The next slide covers our one-shot appropriations. The big one there, E350, is the continued Otis modernization. We have some others for regular computer replacement, radio replacement based on the NDOT upgrade, some firearm replacement, and taser replacement. I'll go into the Otis replacement a little bit more. As on the next slide we'll show, since that one has been ongoing for many years. We are still scheduled to go live with the new Otis replacement in December of this year. We have a quality assurance and development environment that are being used by us and the vendor. The vendor uses the development environment with dummy data to mock things up, and then the QA environment allows us to put some of our real data in there to then make sure that the way the data looks in Otis, it looks the same in the new system. We have continued to work on customizing and configuring all of our operational units that we kind of discussed in the beginning: PSIs, pardons, supervision, restitution, collection. All of those units have been participating, and we're in various stages of development in all those units. Our contracted database administrator is working every single day on the data mapping, and that's the biggest challenge right now, is mapping the data that's in Otis, a 20-plus-year-old system, into a new system, and making sure that the last name in this system matches up with the last name here. And currently Otis has so many fields that are free-form text, which, if you know anything about data or coding, free-form text is the bane of everyone's data existence. And so trying to map and find ways to make those work in a better data-driven model is difficult. And then interface development is continuing to happen. If there was going to be delays, this is where they would occur, is in the interface development, because we're not only working on our own timeline, but the timelines of our other partners, whether that's the NCGIS mod project, it's NDOC, other vendors that we use like Spillman. We can't guarantee that their schedules are going to match up with ours, but luckily our vendor is in place. The work program is in place past December of 23. It's through the end of the next fiscal year for the development portion. So even if some of the integrations take a little bit longer, we feel that the core base product will still be going live in December of this year. There just may be some integrations that need some work a little bit after that. The next slide covers our supervision caseload ratios. These are the approved ratios that we base everything on. I don't think I necessarily need to go through every single one for you guys, but if you have questions, it gives you an idea of where we would like to be. And this is based on true adequate staffing, 100% of our FTE positions filled, trained, out on their own, etc. The next slide is caseload ratios for our non-sworn categories. We do have a lot of cases that are monitored by non-sworn individuals, so like the warrants and extraditions unit, those are all individuals that have gone to either a probation warrant or a parole warrant they're out somewhere, these individuals monitor those cases. Similar with the Interstate Compact pre-release, those are all civilian-related caseloads. The pardon writers and the post-conviction report writers as well. The pardons, we have an asterisk on there. There's some confusion when we were going through this about the requirements of how many pardons reports should be written per investigator per year, but we're working on honing our response and getting that to JFA to find some concurrence on that. Next is our current offender caseload, around 20,600 individuals, majority on probation, about 12,400, about 6,000 on parole. And then lifetime supervision, which is a very narrow set of convicted sex offenders with a lifetime supervision that happens after their parole or probation, is about 2,100 throughout the state. Next slide, very quickly. I'm sure you've heard it numerous times already, vacancy rates. We are, 30+% vacant in the sworn. We have large vacancies in the non-sworn as well. I think the next slide really gives the best illustration of what these sworn vacancies are doing to the division. In response to an executive branch audit committee recommendation, we went to a weighted system to try to get a better picture of the true representation of the caseload based on actual staffing. So we applied a weighted value to each case based on its risk level. So a low-risk person should have a lower weighted value than a high-risk person or a sex offender. Because those, the higher the risk, the more resources they're going to take. So when we applied a weighted value to all of our cases and broke it down by office with the current vacancies and the number of cases that have to be supervised, you'll see that on average, the statewide total, each officer caseload is 141% of capacity. And those are based on those approved staffing ratios and the weighted values. And so that's across the board average. We know with averages, there's going to be some that are lower. We also know there's going to be some that are a lot higher. And if you look at our three largest offices between Reno, Carson, and Las Vegas, if you only include those, that number goes up to like 148% of capacity. And when our officers are working over capacity like that, everything becomes reactive. Not everything. It gets very hard to be proactive, right? And the goal of a probation officer is to be proactive, help provide those resources to people, address violations quickly and swiftly and certainly. But when you're 48% over what your work is determined to be, we're just all reactionary. We're putting out fires. We're only focusing on the people that need the absolute most attention at that time, and that's not providing the best quality supervision. And if it continues, like in the maintenance unit M202, we're supposed to get 9 positions for new officers. Great. If we can't fill them, they're not going to be able to satisfy the needs where we see the growth in the certain populations. So even in our smaller offices like Elko and Ely that look like they're under, that's because they have 2 officers. And so if one officer's out sick or on leave or on light duty, they're immediately going to be, over their weighted value of what their capacity would allow. So we're doing the best that we can. Everybody is still being supervised. Like offenders are grouped based on risk level or type of crime or whatever. They have some sort of contact with our personnel regardless, but the quality is certainly going to be eroded when you're at the capacity that we're at. So that concludes our presentation. Major Schubert and I's information is up there. And we will certainly answer any questions that you have for us.
Thank you so much. We'll start with Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. You talked a lot about staffing and some of the problem areas that you're experiencing. My question is really back to that M201, M202 decision units and caseload changes for the Specialist 3 and Specialist 4 positions. Will that result in any layoff of an incumbent employee? What is your plan for the people who are there now?
Major James Schubert for the record. So if M201 did go through, those positions are filled right now. So that would result in either a voluntary demotion to a Specialist 3 position or layoffs. I don't know if that answers your question.
Follow-up, Chair. Thank you. It does answer my question. Given the fact that we have such difficulty filling so many vacant positions, I was just really hoping to hear that we had a plan for promotion or further development of those existing employees.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Thank you very much, Chair. I had a question regarding, prior to 2017 legislative session, the agency had maintained a supervision ratio of 1 to 3 parole and probation specialist 4 to parole and probation specialist 3 positions in Las Vegas and 1 to 16 all other locations. Could you talk a little bit about how has it been effective, the agency ability to deliver pre-sentence investigations in a more timely manner with these adjustments?
Major James Schubert for the record. It will. So this just started in July of 2022 is when we kind of started making this change. And without the additional Specialist 4 positions, we can't really implement it fully at this time. So we're not going to realize the gains that it's going to have. Right now, the supervisors are pulling double duty. They're doing a lot of that reading portion. And the Specialist 4s have not been really moved into this new workload as fully. So we're waiting for these new positions, and once we get those, then we can really evaluate what this is going to change. And again, in 2 years from now, we'll be back and saying, okay, we've had 2 years of this. Now we need to adjust it this way or that way. The Specialist 3s are doing all the writing. So I know that was a question before was, the Specialist 4s were supposed to be writing. The 3s are doing that writing. We are doing that with overtime right now, but we also have 13 vacancies in the Specialist 3 positions. So once those are filled, which we got a recruitment going right now, they would be able to cover all the PSIs that we are assigned.
Thank you, Chair, and I think that answered my second question too, so thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move on to Assemblyman Hafen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you guys for the presentation today. I kind of want to talk a little bit more about the parole and probation specialist 4 positions that you're requesting in regards to the pre-sentence investigation reports. Are we going to be able to fill those positions? Do we have, I think 13 was the number for the specialist 3 positions. Of vacancies. So are we gonna have the same issue with the Specialist 4? And then how is that gonna relate to any backlog or trying to get the reports done in a timely manner?
Major James Schubert for the record. So the Specialist 4 positions, yes, will more than likely be filled by our current Specialist 3s. And I don't anticipate a issue filling the Specialist 4 positions, but what it is going to cause a chain reaction, right? So now we lose 6 Specialist 3s that moved on to Specialist 4s, so now we have to do a hiring portion again. But having those 4s available to train, we'll be able to do that a little bit faster than we have been in the past. Right now, I think we have 10 positions statewide, and the 4s really take on the brunt of all the training for our 3s. So not only are they trying to write, they're trying to train. So adding these more positions will allow us to move a little bit faster in that hiring process. And will there be a little bit of delays? I'm confident there will be because we're going to be short-staffed with personnel. Just a shout out to our Specialist 3s and 4s. They are doing a lot of overtime right now, and they are we're doing very well getting the PSIs there as fast as we can, and they're doing a great job of that, and I'm sure they will continue that. And this gives them a little bit of hope, right? So your 3s have a little bit more hope that there's more promotional opportunities. And then we're hiring on new people, which obviously come in a little more excited for a new job, and then they'll be working well too. So will there be a little bit of a delay? Yes. But I think that's the nature of the beast. Whenever you add new positions and you do promotions, there's always that little lag.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Goycochea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, this is going to be a broad gamut, kind of a shotgun approach to this. Okay, the counties are responsible for 70% of the PSIs, paying for those. Now, I assume when we say counties, that we're talking all local government. Is that correct? Okay, clearly we've got a backlog in pre-sentence investigations. How is that trickling down to our district courts? It's got to be impacting them significantly, and if there's one thing I hear, it's, complaints from some of the local governments about the costs. Just a response.
Aaron Evans for the record. Our submission rate for PSIs is in the 99%. We are submitting them on time as frequently as possible. And to Major Schubert's point, we're killing our people with overtime. Now, there's always going to be times where mistakes happen or PSIs get turned in late, but we are making every effort. I mean, there's statutory guidelines that we have to have them to the court within, 15 days prior to sentencing, all that, and we are killing our people to make those deadlines. So at this point, we're making requests to extend, maybe push out a sentencing to have more time to get those done. But as of right now, we're doing everything we can to get them turned in on time. So hopefully those complaints that you're hearing are one-offs and special situations.
No, and I really appreciate that, but I thought it should be put on the record that, it is critical. How much of the budget does that 70%, how big a piece, any way to, all right, they're responsible for 70% of the PSIs, is that 5% of the total budget?
Aaron Evans for the record. I do not have that in front of me to know what percentage it is. They do cover most of the PSI writers and some of the support staff that directly support them, but I don't know what the total of my budget or our budget is.
I appreciate that. I just was curious how much it was. And then when I look at the rural counties, Elko, Ely, and our offices, and then Winnemucca being at 145, I just assume you're probably a man short there.
Aaron Evans, for the record, that's correct. We have 2 officers and a sergeant in Winnemucca. Currently, we have 1 sergeant and 1 officer that covers a large region.
Changes the percentages. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And if you could just make sure that you follow up with the information Senator Goycochea was requesting, it'd be greatly appreciated. Senator Wynn.
Sorry, I was having flashbacks to my day job. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't know the last time I received a PSI 15 days prior. I have a question. Has there been any effort to work with the district courts in when those sentencings are set? I know in the past they had been set within like 30 days or 45 days, and one of the last cases that I said, even an in-custody person was set for a sentencing maybe, 60 days out now. Has there been any effort to try to relieve some of that, those problems and that backlog by working with the courts to extend the amount of time you have to do them?
Aaron Evans for the record. I'll answer Northern and Washoe County related, and then I'll let Major Schubert chime in as well for Clark County. In Washoe County, we did have a meeting with the chief judge about in-custody defendants versus out-of-custody defendants and asking for the out-of-custodies to be pushed out further, 60 days or more, 90 days at one point when we were really short on our PSI writers. Obviously, our in-custody defendants, we didn't want to budge as they're sitting in custody. So there have been attempts to, make some inroads with that. But not all judges agree. And so we get some that are more than willing to push those out and some that are less willing to do so. And that's kind of a northern approach. I'll let Major Schubert ask for Clark County.
Major Schubert, for the record, it's very similar in the South. So if they're out of custody, we are asking for extensions to move those sentencing dates. The in custody ones, we really focus to get those done on time because obviously they're in custody. We do receive, a lot of requests that are not giving us the full 45 days. And again, we're moving cases around internally to try to figure out who is available to get this done in that time frame. And I have the stats here. I think 34% of the PSIs we received from June 2022 to current were less than that 45 days. So we do, again, me and him are both deputy chiefs. We do not have a chief who I think would have kind of taken us on as their job, but we are going to have meetings with the chief judge down here and try to talk to them about that too and see if we can get a little bit of extension while we're going through this change and while we're trying to hire these 13 new PSI writers so we can be within our 45-day time frame.
Chair Watts.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So I think we've been getting at this with a few different questions, but I just, especially Ms. Brigham, since you're here, we've talked before about the overall challenges the agency is facing, the overall vacancy rates. And I understand that we have this process in place to do caseload projections, to set ratios, but to just put it into real terms, right? Those are all numbers on paper, and if we can't recruit or retain folks, then the actual caseload is a different matter. People are going to be burned out, pushed to the brink on overtime. So I just kind of want to cut to the chase and say, understanding this whole process, the overall process that we still need to go through, is this going to actually make sure that we can get the caseloads to the level that we need to be, given that in the past we've discussed that even some of the proposals to make improvements aren't necessarily going to make huge dents in reducing vacancies so much as preventing the problem from getting worse.
Sherry Brigham for the record. Yes, to answer your question bluntly, then this is all on paper. Even if we got 100% filled of all of our positions, you're still going to have sick, you're still going to have layoffs, or not layoffs, but workers' comp, leave, whatever. So even on paper, you're never going to be at 100%. But as far as the vacancies and filling them faster and processing and changing processes to be able to do all of that, we've done just about all we have done all we know to do so far. But our competitiveness in wages for all of our positions is so offset by the locals. We're so far away from them that we get the last group of people who are interested in either being an officer or, for that matter, an employee of the state. So if you can go to the county and make 25 to 35, sometimes double what you're making at the state, they do. They don't even have to leave PERS in order to do it. Their benefits aren't harmed. In fact, they have more. So, our goal is to get close enough to be at least, I can't think of the word right now, competitive, thank you, to the locals. And at least then our recruitment would be based on who we are and what we do, and they really would rather work for us. Because in quite a few of the locals that we're most competing with, our people will go over there and they're jail handlers or security or whatever for years until they get out on the road. And even then, the duties are so significantly different that it may not be what they're looking for. But when they can't pay their bills or even have a car of their own, that's a real problem. And right now, it's a real problem. Even in our recruiting, as I've told you a million times, we have a weekly recruiting meeting. And so we're trying to fill the upcoming academy that starts, I think, the 21st of March. And right now, we've got a good group of people that are in process. We're doing the backgrounds. We're hung up on the medicals. So there isn't enough medical providers to be able to get them through in a reasonable amount of times. I mean, if we've got the background done, we've got everything done, and we just need a medical expert to say, you're fit for duty, yeah, go forward, great. But we have one contract, and right now we're waiting 3 to 6 weeks to get them scheduled. So, every time we run into something that's holding us back, we run around to try and figure out a way around the rules. So we looked at POST, and POST doesn't say that we have to use our risk management system, which is the one we're using right now. I can't think of the name. But we could use any doctor. So if we can get what we're planning to do now, and this is as of yesterday, is get the requirements from POST on what they need to be measured at a doctor's office, let them take it to their own doctor or somebody else that can see them sooner, and have them sign off on them and get them into our academies faster. We're making hiring contingent on good doctor's appointments and getting them into the academy anyway, even if we were to lose them, just because we can't risk losing anybody just because of paperwork, and that's frustrating. So we continue to push the envelope. Every single opportunity we find a difficulty with our 1 or 2 persons, we do whatever we can to do it. I think I mentioned the Skill Bridge program that was set up between the state of Nevada and DOD to help us recruit their retiring veterans before they're out of their job. So they give us about, I think it's 6 months on their pay and let us employ them, and then we can train them, we can do their backgrounds, we can do everything. But there's limits, because if I put them in the academy, they can't earn overtime. It's a rule. It's part of the contract. Well, our academies always have overtime. So we figured out a way around that. So we're bringing them in. We're going to do it anyway, and that's just what we have to do to get around some of the requirements that take time, because there are other issues in play. Not a lot of doctors around. One contract to be able to do it. So there's just those kind of things going on. But yes, this is not enough. It won't be enough. But we can hope, and we can keep working, and we'll do our best with what we have. Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple of questions about the house arrest program. Does the agency know the cost of supervision per offender?
Major James Schubert for the record. There's a sliding scale, so it can go anywhere from $18 to, I believe, $25 a day. So we kind of use that as our baseline for determining how much it's going to cost them, and usually the program is anywhere from 30 to 60 days. So there's a couple different factors that are in that equation.
Okay, so you answered a different question than I asked. I'm looking for the cost to the agency to conduct the supervision, not what you charge folks.
Major James Schubert for the record. I'm trying to figure out how to answer that. I'm not truly understanding your question. So we contract with a company which completes the house arrest. So that cost is strictly from them to us. So we would pay that through the state-funded house arrest program. So there's no out-of-pocket, I guess, cost for us. We would get that back through that state-funded house arrest program through this money, through the E350.
So,
does that answer your question?
Almost. Go ahead and click off your mic. There you go. So it seems to me that there's probably several buckets to the cost, right? So you have the actual cost of the software monitoring system, but then there's also personnel costs associated with doing the supervision itself, right? So what I'm trying to figure out is if the agency has ever done a calculation on what it costs the agency, not just the software, but also in personnel, to conduct the supervision per offender.
Major James Schubert for the record. No, we have not ever done that to my knowledge. We are staffed at a ratio of 30-1. So our officers that are doing the house arrests we're funded at a 30-1 ratio. So that's a piece of it, but no, we've never really done a cost of what it is to us per person per time that they're on house arrest. Unless Major Evans, I don't know if you have additional to add to that.
Aaron Evans, for the record. Major Schubert mentioned we have a caseload ratio of 30-1. Like, we already supervise individuals on house arrest. We currently use house arrest as a sanction for violations. So we have a whole system already set up if the person can afford the house arrest. In lieu of them being incarcerated again, it's like, we'll give you another option. You go on house arrest, you wear this ankle bracelet. You have to be able to afford that. To be able to apply that in a broad spectrum regardless of income, that's why we need the state-funded portion, to where if somebody doesn't have the means, that the state can step in, divert them away from going back to jail or prison, put them on house arrest. So our caseload ratio of 30-1, that's 30 individuals on house arrest to one officer. That's happening today as we speak. So know that we don't have a direct cost. We would have to reallocate maybe some positions, officers, for the influx of number of people on house arrest. But that means we're having fewer people in our moderate risk unit or fewer offenders in the high risk unit because they go to the house arrest unit. So it's kind of just a shuffling of where the cards go, and we still have officers. So I think maybe to your point, we might need more house arrest officers if there's more people on house arrest. And since that's a lower ratio than some of the other ones, it might need an officer, but we've always kind of absorbed those needs in the past.
So what I'm really trying to get at is this idea of like a cost of service, right? If you're charging folks $30, but it only costs you $18, that means there's $12 that actually might be used to subsidize someone else instead of the state portion, right? Now, if it actually costs $30 because it's the 18 plus we have some salary savings, right, that the state doesn't have to pay, then that's a different scenario. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is how closely overlapped do we have the fee we are charging folks who can pay it to the cost to actually do the supervision, or are they paying, if it's $11 and they're paying $30, that's more than double the cost to actually provide the service, right? So I'm looking at, how did we come up with the supervision fees? What factors were in setting that fee, and how closely is it actually aligned to the cost to supervise them?
Sherry Brigham for the record. So we're talking about the revenue stream for the supervisor fees. So those were set up, eons ago, and we barely get that revenue in anyway. Because of Marcy's Law, any money that they put in, that the offenders pay us, has to go to restitution first. So I would say it's along with our reimbursement for tests, a number of other things. It rarely comes in on budget. It's always lower. So the cost was set up a long time ago, but even so, it's hard to get blood out of a turnip.
How
Major
can
James
offenders?
Schubert for the record.
Oh, go ahead, please. Yeah, go ahead.
If you're talking about the cost for house arrest, it is a 1-to-1. If Scram charges them $8, that's all we charge. If they charge them $10, that's all they charge. So we don't charge an additional fee to be on house arrest. That is strictly for the services that Scram provides them. So there's no additional cost by the division for them to be on house arrest. It's a 1-to-1 cost of whatever Scram charges them. That's what we charge them.
What are options for folks to pay this fee?
Aaron Evans for the record. The way the system currently works with our contract with Scram is it's directly between the offender and Scram. So, like I said, in lieu of going to jail, they agree to be put on house arrest. Their payments go directly to Scram. We don't get involved. If they get too far behind in their payments, Scram will send us notice of a deficiency, and we'll have to remove them from the program. And at that point, we'll have to reevaluate the totality of their violations, and do they need to be returned to the court or board? Are there other sanctions we can use? Whatever. That's current system when it's all offender funded. New system, we will be doing budgeting with the offender, like, all right, you violated, we're going to fill out this budget form. We see that you do not have the discretionary income to afford $8 a day or whatever it is, and then we will go through the process of putting them on state-funded house arrest so that we fund it, so that we can apply it appropriately to everybody regardless of their income or discretionary income.
So I think I'm looking more for like cash, check, ACH, debit.
Aaron Evans, for the record. I don't know how Scram accepts those fees. Perhaps Major Schubert does, but I don't know. We don't take any cash at the division. I doubt they take cash. Probably want a more secure, trackable method.
No idea down south either.
Major Schubert, for the record, no, I do not know, and unfortunately our ASO3 is very new, so I'm assuming it's sort of our same method that we pay back the PSIs. It's probably a prorated amount that they check each quarter or each month, but I do not know, sorry.
Okay, what about outside, let's say, of house arrest? What about other fees that you may collect from people who are on parole and or probation? What options do they have to pay?
Aaron Evans, for the record. We charge supervision fees, $30 a month across the board. We take money orders, cashier's checks, personal checks. As of right now, that's it. Part of the Otis development and an interface with Advantage. We want to be able to take credit cards or debit cards, have portals so family members, out of state or whatever, can make payments for those people. But today, personal checks, money orders, cashier's checks is the only method.
And are folks allowed to mail those checks in?
Aaron Evans, for the record, yes. We did a lot of money order and monthly report mailing during COVID when people weren't coming to the office, so we take those checks via the mail.
Same down south?
Major Schubert, for the record, yes, we do a lot of mail-in processing of money orders.
Okay, last question, I promise. Can you just talk a little bit about how the agency determines whether an offender is experiencing financial hardship that would qualify them for participation in the state-funded house arrest program?
Aaron Evans, for the record. We talked about it a little bit before. We have a form that we use for determining an economic hardship in regards to restitution payments. We'll be using a form similar to that, modified for the qualification for house arrest. We go through all their income sources, all their debts and monthly payments, any assets they may have, and we'll have to develop some sort of, kind of like a debt to income ratio or something that determines if your, debt is X percent of your net income, you can afford the $8 a day. Or if we want to put you on house arrest with alcohol monitoring, which, you have to carry around a portable PBT because you have too many alcohol violations, and that's a little more expensive. And so does your debt to income ratio allow you to afford the $15 a day deal? I don't recall exactly how it worked in like FY 2019. I know we really tried to use that sanction heavily at that time to show that it worked and it was a good alternative to reincarceration. But we'll be starting again with this process and making sure that there's set limits and whatever that income ratio needs to be to be able to apply it equally based on income levels. It's in response to a violation. House arrest is a higher level sanction. So that's kind of maybe the last step before being reincarcerated. So, those kind of decisions are usually going to be made with a supervisor to make sure it's an appropriate response to the violation. So it's high level. It'll be on the matrix that some of you may have seen in other presentations for our violations to the sanctions. And then part of that determining if it's the appropriate sanction is also, can they afford it? And if not, can we put them on the state-funded version?
Well, once you all determine how you're going to figure out whether someone can afford it, I would love for you to share that formula or calculation that you all come up with. All right, thank you. We'll go ahead, please.
Sherry Brigham, for the record, I did get the information with regard to the reimbursement on the PSIs, and it's 8.5%.
All right, thank you so much. With that, we'll go ahead and close out that budget hearing. Appreciate you all being so patient with us. And we'll open up the budget hearing for budget account 101-3800, which is the parole board. Welcome.
We'll need one quick second to get the thumb drive going. Good morning, Chair Harris and all members present today, Chair Watts. My name is Chris Tirico. I'm the chairman of the Board of Parole Commissioners. With me today is Kathy Baker, our Management Analyst 1, and Matt Thrasher, our Management Analyst, Management Analyst 3, Management Analyst 1, sorry. Before I get started, I want to say I've watched this committee's presentations previously, and I see we removed a lot of things. I'm going to get to the point for you here, so here we go. Next slide here. On this slide is just our mission statement. I'm not going to go through and read it for you. I know you have a copy of the packet. On slide 3, we want to let you know, of course, that we conduct several hundred hearings each and every month, and they're conducted on a daily basis. There's almost not a day of the week that we're open that we are not conducting parole board hearings. The next slide is a copy of our present organizational chart. We do have 27 FTEs within the parole board, and we're full-time. I know we're a full-time board, much like the Gaming Control Board, and once again, operating each and every day of the week with an office in both Carson City and Las Vegas. So moving right into the rest of our presentation, I want to go over a slide here, which is E225 Fleet Services. This request continues funding for one fleet services vehicle at the Parole Board's Carson City office and requests additional mileage as our office is unable to provide adequate secure storage for this vehicle. During the 22-23 biennium, the Parole Board was legislatively approved for one vehicle. Prior to that, we had two, but with budget cutbacks, we had to turn them both in, and we finally got one back, and that's where we are now. But due to supply chain issues, the board did not receive this one vehicle that we have now until July of 2022, so no funds were expended to fleet services in fiscal year 2022. The decision unit is to continue funding this vehicle and also includes a request for additional mileage. Next slide. E226 is training. This request realigns training funds from in-state travel to mostly out-of-state travel and continues funding staff member expenses while attending statutorily mandated training per NRS 213.1088. Most continuing education training is through the Association of Paroling Authorities International and is held in a different state each year. APAI is the only conference that has parole board specific training. This request also increases $1,391 in training funds for contracted hearing representatives who are also statutorily mandated to attend 16 hours of continuing education each year. Next slide, E240. This was included by accident, and we're working through the budget office for a correction in this matter. E380, new executive director position. This is a request for a new executive director to include compensation and associated costs. This requested position will act on behalf of the chairman and represent the parole board in matters related to board operations.
This request is 100% general fund, and the amount requested is $111,709 in fiscal year 2024 and $137,855 in fiscal year 2025. BDR 23A6603112 has been approved as a budget bill to be added to Chapter 213 of NRS to include an executive director to this statute. Slide 8 shows the organizational chart with the addition of the executive director position and would bring the board's 27 FTEs to 28. As shown, the executive director is overseen by the chairman. Next slide are the one-shots here. We have E710, computer replacement. This decision unit is a proposed efficiency option to replace all desktop computers with laptop computers. This decision unit is located in the Governor's One-Shot Appropriations, GO2, and this request will reduce the number of board computers from 53 to 35 from the board's fixed asset inventory, saving the state approximately $31,589 in this biennium. This request is 100% general fund, and the amount requested of $66,169 in this biennium. E711 is the next slide. Is the decision unit purchases for Windows 11 licenses for 6 laptops that will not meet the EATS 5-year replacement schedule until fiscal year 26. However, Windows 10 will no longer be supported in October of 25, which means these laptops will not be operational without the licenses to upgrade to Windows 11. This request is also 100% general fund. E712, network equipment. This decision unit funds 2 routers, 2 network switches, and 2 firewalls per EATS recommendation. These items are end of life and end of support by EATS, and this is once again 100% general fund. Slide 11, this essentially concludes our presentation for the day. We're smaller than the Division of Parole and Probation, have a lot less, so we're here and available to answer any questions that you may have to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Well done, sir. Thank you. I think our first questions will be from Senator Goycochea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess first and foremost, what kind of backlog are you guys experiencing, and are there any compliance issues within the agency currently due to your organization?
Chris Tirico, for the record. I was hoping this question wouldn't come up, but we have no backlog. All of our parole hearings and everything are on different than the pardons board, where there's a backlog at the pardons board. The parole board hearing, ours, we're on track. We conduct all of our parole hearings approximately 90 days before someone is eligible, and we have that buffer time in there so that once the decision is made, once a decision is made, there's time before they're even eligible to be released. So there is no backlog with the parole board.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. Now, you requested an executive director position, and looking at the makeup and the fact that 2 of your members, 2 or more, can constitute a quorum, I could see why you'd want someone other than yourself as the chair, having to make all the meetings. And I apologize, I've never been before the parole board, thank God. But anyway, how would adding this executive director position help the operations? And it sounds like you really don't need any help. You're doing a bang-up job.
Chris Tirico, for the record. So I will say although you, Senator Goycochea, although you've never been before the parole board, I throw this out every time I'm here. If you guys are all welcome to come to our offices in either Las Vegas and Carson City and to observe parole board hearings. They are open hearings and they're open to the public, and certainly if any of you would like to come, I throw that out, and please contact me, and at least if you say you haven't been in one, which is good, but you can come observe and witness like anybody else can. So with this, yes, we're going and working and things are moving along. We don't have a backlog. An executive director and a parole board chairman, if we were to have both those positions, they may sound kind of similar, but they're really distinctly different in here. They have different roles. So the chairman and to include board members kind of
want to put together that long-term plan and goal, and the executive director is kind of the boots on the ground to get those, the rest of the staff and moving to get that plan moving and operational. Parole Board chairman, commissioners, we're tasked with making high-level decisions with people's lives. Okay, is somebody eligible to come back to the community? Can they safely be supervised? Should at this point in time someone should stay incarcerated more for whatever reason? So we make those really big key decisions, whereas an executive director administratively and operationally is going to kind of take care of things, everything within the office related. I can tell you that since I started with the board back in 2017, became chairman in 2018. I did not go to junior chairman training program, okay? I had to literally immerse myself into everything. A lot of times I feel like I was an undercover boss without being undercover. From filing to snow removal to do it, everything is like, it's my role and my responsibility. All of these administrative issues, I've had to jump in and immerse and to kind of become that person. It's gotten to the point where it can't continue. I mean, administratively, I should be focusing on other duties to better the system, working along with, make sure our risk assessments are good, making sure to do the research and working with community partners and stakeholders to make sure we're doing the best we can for the citizens of this state and for the people that we're dealing with, the incarcerated individuals. And so, it's kind of administratively, I would no longer have to be signing off on and conducting job interviews and doing all of these things that I'm not saying aren't necessary, but they're not necessary. They could be performed so much better with that. And the last thing I kind of want to add on this is prior to this request, well, not prior to, but probably in relation to this request, I reached out to CJI, who I know some of us in here worked with the part of AB 236, and had them conduct a study with regard to executive director-like positions and commissioner pay. They did an independent study for me on this, and we were able to determine that 29 of the 50 states have this type of position. And it is very, and like Senator Goicoechea mentioned here, this and open meeting law and quorums, and I can't just go to Commissioner X and start discussing having things. So there are things that rise to the level of having an actual board meeting, and that we have to do that. Those wouldn't go away. But the administrative and operational duties that we'll be able to tackle in a much quicker manner, in a much better manner, will help us to move forward. I don't want us to stay stagnant. I want us to move forward and be better. And I hope that answers your question.
Surely does. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to go to Assemblywoman Dickman, but you may have answered the question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to ask you how the duties would differ, but you've pretty much explained execution versus decisions. And I just want to know how you survived prior to this, hearing, how it's been.
Costa Rica for the record. So, yeah, things haven't been easy, but the one thing, at least I can say my staff knows, I'm not afraid of work. Never have been. And to jump in and help anywhere where I can. I have an outstanding staff. For the most part, I maintain my staff. I have one vacant position. And my staff, I consider them the true assets of the parole board. It's not me. I'm just kind of the herder here. But what they do, and especially the work these two do, and the rest of my staff, I couldn't be where I'm at, and neither could our board. And so, I'm thankful for what I have. I'm just really appreciative, and I think I have as committed as a staff as there is around. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good to hear. And it seems to me the biggest help this is going to be is the open meetings. So thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any other questions from members before I ask? I've got one. And unfortunately for you, this actually may be the problem of the folks who were at the table before you. But I'm going to lay it on your lap and see what you do with it. So we've heard some testimony in Senate Judiciary that there are folks who have been granted either parole or probation, and are languishing because they do not have plans prepared. Can you explain a little bit about why that would ever happen, what we might need to do to fix that?
Chris Tirico for the record. So I am aware of what you're talking about, and I can answer from parole board's perspective. I don't want to speak for parole and probation or Department of Corrections. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we conduct our parole hearings approximately 90 days before an eligibility date. Every so often, or if a hearing is continued for some reason, that's not always the case. But they're always set. We get the eligibility list from the Department of Corrections, and we know 90 days. So if we get the list, let me break it down a little bit more. If we get the eligibility list this month, which is we would get February, or we're in March now, March 20th, we will know who's eligible for parole in September, okay? In March, we'll know for September, and that hearing would be conducted in June, okay? So we know. If there's a grant of parole, what happens from there is, let me step back. Last session, with AB 236, NDOC is supposed to be working with the division, I believe the statute says 6 months prior to parole eligibility on their plan. I believe that's what it says there. We don't do those. So that process is supposed to start then. Once we would have an order to grant, then that caseworker and working with, I believe, PMP's embedded specialists who are at the facilities are to work on that plan. Now we kind of get to why might there be somebody, we've approved, we said, go ahead and grant them when eligible, and why might they not get out? Most of that, my understanding, is because of that approved plan. Statutorily, it says there has to be an approved plan before they can be released. So if the division is unable to secure a plan, we have someone that may be, I don't know what their requirements, so I don't want to really speak there, but if they don't have an approved plan, or let's say they're going to go live with another convicted felon and that plan was, denied and they need to work on a subsequent plan, that could be why. But statutorily, it does say that they have to have an approved plan before release. So if they don't have a plan, they likely wouldn't be released. I can tell you also, I'm aware of inmates who have been granted parole who basically go, I'm not working on a plan. I don't want to do it. I want to expire here in custody. And those people just sit there and do that because they don't want to work with to even finish a plan they didn't want out in the first place. And so I'm hoping that's shed a little bit of light there, at least from our perspective and what I'm aware of.
Yeah, I mean, that's helpful for the process, and I appreciate that. I guess I'm wondering, maybe what percentage of folks are folks who just want to expire, because if they want to expire, that's their right. But what I'm suggesting is that that may not be the majority of folks who are still in, and they may be in because their plan hasn't been completed. And I don't know if it's because, one thing I've heard is that inmates are expected to come up with this plan on their own without any assistance. So I'm trying to figure out what the cause is for the folks who want to be out, right? Let's let go of the people who want to expire, that's fine. But for the folks who want to be out, why they are not, and how we can do better to make sure that they are, especially given that we know 6 months out when they may be up for probation or parole, right? I'm trying to figure out where the problem is and how to fix it so that as soon as you say they can go, they can go.
Chris Tirico for the record. So once again, with AB 236 in 2019, that was before, I believe it kicked it from 3 months ahead prior to eligible for a parole hearing to 6 months for NDOC and PMP to work together. So we're talking, it should be started there with a caseworker and I believe they're embedded specialists at that point in time. I'm not positive if it starts with them at that time. I defer to the division on that. But then even once that grant, that I know that's part of the reason that embedded specialist is there in order to help work on that plan and ideally have a plan approved ahead of time for when that eligibility date comes up, let's just say October 1st, by October 1st, they're ready to go and walk out the gate. But that's really not the board's, but I'm just trying to provide you a little bit insight of what I have there.
Thanks for playing the game with me. Any additional questions on this budget item? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and close the hearing. Thank you so much. And we will move on to public comment. Is there anyone here in Carson City who would like to give public comment? Okay, seeing none here. Also, a quick visual check in Las Vegas confirms there's no one there to give public comment. BPS, would you mind please checking the phone lines?
Thank you, Chair. The public lines are open and working. However, there are no callers to offer public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, we are adjourned. Have a great day, everybody.